Hi everyone, Jacob Aldridge here from Don't Waste a Good Recession, Economic Snapshot number 16,
Overall,
the last
globally,
of
there
our
have
weekly
now been
snapshots
over 10
before we shift
million
into the
confirmed
monthly
cases of
economic
COVID-19,
program. If you want to learn more about that, watch our
deaths,
separate video, which
more
we're
than
putting out
5
this
million
week, the first
people
week
who
of
have
July
recovered
of 2020,
from the disease.
explaining
Now,
all of the economic
just
indicators
look at
that we've
those
been
deaths.
researching,
Some simple
explaining
math,
why the recession is already over,
divided
and
into 10
talking a
million
little bit more
is a
about
case
our
fatality
economic
rate
program and
of
our business
5%.
program moving
But
forward. Let's jump into the actual
that
numbers
assumption
for this week.
continues.
So overall globally, there have now been just over 10 million confirmed COVID-19 cases, 522,000 deaths. Good news, more than 5 million recovered. Now, just on those deaths, some simple math, 500,000 divided into 10 million is a case fatality rate of 5%. So that's a number that's being thrown around. However, there continue to be a few assumptions that are linked to that. The assumption continues to be that an unknown number of cases have not been detected. So if 10 million COVID-19 cases is actually 50 million cases, then that CFR, the case fatality rate, is actually 1%, which is not dissimilar to a bad annual flu. The same assumption, though, is that many people have died from COVID-19 without being a confirmed case. And this is especially true in countries where, for economic or political reasons, testing is difficult. Why waste a scarce COVID-19 test on someone who has already died? So that death count, 522,000, is also too low. And sadly, many of the 4 million active cases today will also die from this disease. So if you only look at deaths versus recoveries, then for every 10 people in that group, 1 has died, 9 have recovered, and that's 10% fatality rate. So just like when we started these weekly updates way back in March of 2020, there are too many unknowns to make firm conclusions about the disease or the flow-on effects it's going to have on our economy, on different sectors, and of course on your small and medium-sized business into the future. What we do know is that it is ridiculously contagious, a very high ref number. And it doesn't take much for an outbreak to kick off again. Australia has doubled the number of active cases in the past fortnight, up 29% last week, up 51% this week. 2 weeks ago, in this economic snapshot, I said my family was planning a local road trip. That's now been cancelled as those numbers skyrocket. Stock markets, fairly flat, up slightly again this week. We had some new data from the US around unemployment, one of the other 4 key indicators that we track in every economic snapshot. The US unemployment figures for June were released and they were another improvement. This represents 3.2 million fewer unemployed people, 3.2 million people who were unemployed last month who are re-employed in June, that percentage down to 11.1%. Now, remember from last month's positive numbers when we had a conversation about those, we're looking at the trend, not any specific bit of data, to help separate lockdown unemployment from recession unemployment. So it's absolutely good news that easing lockdown restrictions have meant millions of people could return to work. But America still has 12 million more unemployed people today than it did in February. If lockdowns recommence, as they're starting to do in California and some other states that have seen a spike in active cases, then the unemployment rate will rise again. So if I had to speculate around the unemployment rates in those 3 countries that we've been tracking, the UK, the US and Australia, in the US the number will continue to decline. Heading into summer to July, we've got the July 4th weekend happening right now, August, seasonal unemployment picks up, and what I consider to be quite stupid, lockdown restrictions continue to ease. So the number of unemployed Americans will continue to decline, but after the northern summer, all 3 of those countries that we've been tracking will start to converge. Job support programs in the UK and Australia will end or be curtailed significantly. That's going to send those unemployment numbers up in those countries. The US may come down a little bit, but those numbers are going to get a lot closer together than they currently are. That in turn is going to send consumer confidence back down. We're going to start having all of those tertiary effects that are discussed in the Don't Waste a Good Recession cornerstone video on how a recession typically progresses. Lastly, for this week, final GDP numbers for the UK March quarter were released, and as with the USA, they were worse than first reported. Originally, it was negative 2% growth, the worst quarter for the UK since 2008, the Great Recession. It's now been confirmed it was actually worse than that. It was a negative 2.2% growth, or a 2.2% contraction if you speak English, not economist. That's actually the worst quarter for the UK since 1979. And the June quarter is projected to be much worse in all three of those countries. The UK only saw GDP growth in one quarter of the past year. So we will call this the Coronavirus Recession because that is the key impact of this recession, the thing that we are all going to remember from it. But the underlying weakness already existed in many countries. We're all in the same stormy seas, but some economies and some businesses arrived in leaky boats. Until next month, I'm Jacob Aldridge.